The bitter February wind howled across the frozen landscape of Denali National Park, Alaska, carrying with it the scent of snow and the promise of another harsh winter night. Search and rescue coordinator Jake Morrison pulled his thick parka tighter around his shoulders as he studied the topographical map spread across the hood of his truck. The year 2011 had already proven to be one of the most challenging for the Alaskan search and rescue team, with record snowfall and temperatures that hadn't risen above -20 degrees Fahrenheit in weeks. "Radio check. Base to all units," Jake spoke into his handheld radio, the device crackling with static in the frigid air. "We've got confirmation on the missing hiker's last known position, grid reference Charlie 74. The missing person was Dr. Sarah Chen, a 34-year-old wildlife biologist from the University of Alaska, who had been conducting research on Arctic fox populations. She had failed to return to base camp 3 days ago, and her GPS beacon had gone silent somewhere in the treacherous terrain near Mount McKinley. With each passing hour, the chances of finding her alive diminished exponentially in these unforgiving conditions. Jake's most trusted companion in these missions was Rex, a 5-year-old German Shepherd mix whose nose had saved more lives than Jake could count. The dog's thick double coat was perfectly adapted to Alaska's harsh climate, and his intelligence and determination had made him legendary among the rescue teams. Rex sat patiently beside the truck, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air, his dark eyes alert and ready for action. "All right, boy," Jake said, kneeling down to attach Rex's specialized rescue harness. The bright orange vest was equipped with reflective strips and a small camera that would allow the team to see what Rex encountered during his search. "We've got someone out there who needs our help." The rescue team consisted of 6 experienced members: Jake, his partner Maria Santos, 2 additional handlers with their dogs, and 2 technical rescue specialists. They had been working together for over 3 years, and their coordination was seamless. Each member knew their role, and more importantly, they trusted each other with their lives. As they prepared to venture into the wilderness, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this mission would be different. The weather conditions were deteriorating rapidly, with a major storm system approaching from the west. The National Weather Service had issued severe weather warnings, predicting blizzard conditions with winds exceeding 60 miles per hour and visibility near zero. "Jake, we've got maybe 6 hours before this storm hits," Maria called out, checking her equipment one final time. Her breath formed ice crystals on her face mask as she spoke. "If we don't find her by then, we'll have to pull back." The team began their ascent into the mountainous terrain, following the last known GPS coordinates from Dr. Chen's emergency beacon. The snow was deep and powdery, making each step a struggle even with snowshoes. Rex, however, moved with remarkable grace across the frozen landscape, his paws finding purchase where humans struggled. 2 hours into the search, Rex suddenly stopped and began barking excitedly. His tail wagged furiously as he pawed at something buried in the snow. Jake rushed over, his heart racing with hope. Using his gloved hands, he carefully brushed away the snow to reveal a torn piece of bright blue fabric, the same color as the jacket Dr. Chen had been wearing according to her research partner. "Base, this is Morrison," Jake radioed back to headquarters. "Rex has found evidence. We're on the right track." The discovery energized the entire team. They were close, and Rex's behavior indicated that the scent trail was fresh. The dog's nose twitched constantly as he worked, processing thousands of scent molecules that told him a story invisible to human senses. His training had taught him to distinguish between different human scents, even in conditions where the cold threatened to freeze his nostrils. As they continued deeper into the wilderness, the terrain became increasingly treacherous. Steep ravines and hidden crevasses posed constant threats, while the approaching storm made visibility increasingly poor. The temperature continued to drop, and Jake could feel the cold seeping through his multiple layers of clothing. Rex suddenly veered off the main trail, heading toward a series of ice formations that looked like frozen waterfalls. His barking became more urgent, more insistent. Jake trusted his dog's instincts completely. Rex had never led them astray before. "This way," Jake called to his team, following Rex toward what appeared to be a natural ice cave formed by years of freezing and thawing cycles. As they approached the cave entrance, Rex's behavior became even more excited. He was practically vibrating with energy, his nose working overtime as he processed the complex array of scents. Jake could see his breath coming in rapid puffs, and the dog's eyes were bright with the intensity of the hunt. The cave opening was partially obscured by hanging icicles and drifted snow. Jake carefully cleared the entrance, his headlamp illuminating the dark interior. The cave extended back into the mountain, its walls lined with thick ice that reflected their lights like mirrors. "Dr. Chen," Jake called out, his voice echoing off the ice walls. "Sarah, can you hear us?" Rex bounded into the cave ahead of the team, his barks echoing in the confined space. Suddenly, from deep within the cave, came a weak but unmistakable human voice. "Help! Here!" The team rushed forward, following Rex deeper into the ice cave. Their lights revealed a figure huddled against the back wall, wrapped in what appeared to be an emergency blanket. Sarah Chen was alive, conscious and talking, a miracle given the conditions and the time she had been missing. As they reached her, however, Rex's behavior suddenly changed. Instead of the joy and excitement typical of a successful rescue, the dog became agitated and began barking at something deeper in the cave. His hackles were raised, and he kept looking back and forth between the rescued woman and the darkness beyond. "What is it, boy?" Jake asked, but before he could investigate further, the sound of the approaching storm reached their ears. The wind was picking up outside, and they needed to get Dr. Chen to safety immediately. The rescue proceeded smoothly, with Dr. Chen suffering from hypothermia and frostbite, but in stable condition. As they prepared to leave the cave, Rex remained agitated, reluctant to abandon whatever had caught his attention in the depths of the ice cave. Little did Jake know that this successful rescue would be the last time he would see his faithful companion for many months to come. The evacuation of Dr. Sarah Chen proceeded with military precision despite the worsening weather conditions. Jake and his team worked quickly to stabilize her condition, wrapping her in thermal blankets and preparing her for transport. The wind outside the ice cave had intensified dramatically, creating a deafening roar that made communication difficult, even at close range. "Jake, we need to move now," Maria shouted over the howling wind, checking her watch. "The storm's hitting earlier than predicted." Rex, however, remained fixated on something deeper within the cave. The normally obedient dog refused to come when called, instead pacing back and forth at the edge of their light beams, whining and barking intermittently. His behavior was completely out of character. In 5 years of partnership, Jake had never seen Rex disobey a direct command during a rescue operation. "Rex, come," Jake commanded firmly, but the dog only looked at him briefly before returning his attention to the darkness beyond. "We have to go, boy." Dr. Chen, despite her weakened condition, noticed the dog's strange behavior. "There's something else in there," she whispered through chattering teeth. "I heard sounds during the night. Not human, but alive." Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. His experience in Alaska had taught him that the wilderness held many secrets, and not all of them were pleasant. Bears, wolves, and other predators could easily have taken shelter in these caves during the storm. "Maria, get Dr. Chen back to the vehicles," Jake decided. "I'm going to check what's got Rex so worked up." "Jake, no!" Maria protested. "The storm's getting worse by the minute. We need to leave together now." But Jake couldn't abandon his partner's instincts. Rex had saved too many lives for Jake to ignore his warnings now. "Give me 10 minutes. If I'm not back, leave without me. That's an order." Reluctantly, Maria and the rest of the team began the treacherous journey back through the storm with Dr. Chen. Jake watched their lights disappear into the swirling snow before turning back to Rex, who was now pawing frantically at a section of the cave wall. "All right, boy. Show me what's so important," Jake said, following his dog deeper into the cave. The ice formations became more elaborate as they ventured further from the entrance. Centuries of freezing and thawing had created a natural cathedral of ice, with pillars and arches that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. Jake's headlamp beam danced across the surfaces, creating an otherworldly play of light and shadow. Rex led him through a narrow passage that opened into a larger chamber. Here the air was noticeably warmer, suggesting some kind of geothermal activity beneath the ice. Jake could hear the sound of dripping water, indicating that parts of the cave system were subject to partial melting even in winter. Suddenly, Rex stopped and began barking excitedly at what appeared to be another passage leading even deeper into the mountain. Jake approached cautiously, his light revealing fresh scratches in the ice, claw marks that looked far too large to have been made by any small animal. "What the hell?" Jake muttered, examining the marks more closely. They were definitely from a large predator, possibly a bear that had taken shelter in the cave system. Rex's barking became more urgent, and Jake realized that the dog wasn't warning him about danger. He was trying to tell him something else entirely. The scratches weren't random. They seemed to follow a pattern, as if something had been deliberately digging or trying to uncover something buried in the ice. Jake's radio crackled with static. "Jake, where are you?" Maria's voice was barely audible through the interference. "The storm's getting worse. We can barely see the vehicles." "I'm coming," Jake replied. But as he turned to leave, Rex bolted past him into the deeper passage. "Rex, no!" The dog disappeared into the darkness, his barks echoing off the ice walls. Jake had no choice but to follow, his heart pounding as he navigated the narrow, winding passage. The walls seemed to close in around him, and he could feel the weight of thousands of tons of ice and rock above his head. The passage opened into another chamber, this one much larger than the previous ones. Jake's light revealed something that made him stop in his tracks. Embedded in the far wall of the chamber was what appeared to be the partial remains of some kind of structure, wooden beams and metal fixtures that looked decades old, possibly from an old mining operation or research station. Rex was standing in front of the wall, barking at something Jake couldn't see. As Jake approached, his light revealed a section of the ice that looked different from the rest, clearer, more transparent. And within that clear ice, Jake could make out shapes that didn't belong in a natural cave formation. "My God," Jake whispered, moving closer to examine the ice wall. Suddenly, a tremendous crack echoed through the chamber. The storm outside had intensified to the point where the vibrations were affecting the cave structure. Ice began falling from the ceiling, and Jake realized they were in immediate danger of a collapse. "Rex, we have to go now," Jake shouted, but the dog seemed transfixed by whatever he had discovered in the ice. Another crack, louder this time, and Jake could see a fissure opening in the ceiling above them. He lunged forward to grab Rex, but the dog darted away deeper into the chamber. As Jake pursued him, a section of the ceiling gave way, sending tons of ice crashing down between them. When the dust and ice chips settled, Jake found himself on one side of a massive pile of debris, with Rex trapped on the other side. He could hear the dog barking frantically, but the barrier between them was insurmountable. "Rex!" Jake called out desperately, clawing at the ice with his gloved hands. "I'll come back for you, boy, I promise." The cave system continued to groan and crack around him. Jake knew that staying any longer would mean certain death for both of them. With tears freezing on his cheeks, he made the most difficult decision of his life and began the treacherous journey back to the surface. The storm outside was now a full-blown blizzard, with winds exceeding 70 miles per hour and visibility reduced to mere feet. Jake struggled through the snow, following his GPS unit and the faint tracks left by his team. Several times he lost his footing and nearly disappeared into hidden crevasses, but somehow he managed to reach the vehicles just as his team was preparing to mount a search for him. "Where's Rex?" Maria asked immediately, seeing Jake's devastated expression. "He's trapped," Jake said, his voice barely audible over the wind. "The cave collapsed. I couldn't get to him." The team spent the next hour trying to return to the cave, but the storm had completely obscured their tracks, and the risk of avalanche was too great. With heavy hearts, they were forced to retreat to base camp, leaving Rex somewhere beneath the ice and snow. As they drove away through the blizzard, Jake stared back at the mountain, making a silent promise to his faithful companion. He would return, no matter how long it took, and he would find Rex. He had no idea that his dog was not only alive, but had discovered something in that ice cave that would change everything. The months following Rex's disappearance were the darkest of Jake Morrison's career. The official search and rescue operations had been suspended after 2 weeks, when repeated attempts to locate and access the collapsed cave proved futile. The spring thaw had made the area even more unstable, with frequent rock slides and ice shifts that made any rescue attempt extremely dangerous. Jake, however, refused to give up. Every weekend, every day off, every spare moment he had was spent returning to the mountain, searching for any sign of his lost companion. He had invested his own money in specialized ground-penetrating radar equipment, hoping to locate air pockets or passages that might have allowed Rex to survive. "Jake, you have to accept that he's gone," Maria said gently one evening in late May, as they sat in the search and rescue headquarters. The walls were covered with maps marking every area they had searched, every cave system they had explored, every possible route Rex might have taken. It's been 3 months, even if he survived the initial collapse. He's alive, Jake interrupted, his voice firm with conviction. I can feel it. Rex is too smart, too resourceful to just give up and die in there. Dr. Sarah Chen had made a full recovery from her ordeal and had returned to her research work. She often stopped by the rescue headquarters, bringing coffee and offering support to Jake's continued search efforts. She felt a deep sense of responsibility for Rex's fate, knowing that the dog had disappeared while saving her life. I've been thinking about what I saw in that cave, she told Jake during one of her visits. The sounds I heard, the way Rex was behaving, there was definitely something else in there, something that had Rex's attention even more than rescuing me. Jake had been thinking about the same thing. In his 5 years working with Rex, he had never seen the dog so fixated on anything other than a human rescue. Whatever Rex had discovered in that cave had been important enough for him to risk his own life. The breakthrough came in early June, when Jake received a call from a local pilot named Tom Bradley. Tom flew supply runs to remote research stations and mining camps throughout the region, and he had been keeping an eye out for any signs of Rex during his flights. Jake, you need to get up here, Tom's voice crackled through the radio. I'm about 15 miles northeast of where you lost Rex, and I'm seeing something strange. There's a dog down there, and it looks like he's been busy. Jake's heart raced as he grabbed his equipment and headed for Tom's airstrip. Within an hour they were airborne in Tom's small Cessna, flying over the rugged terrain where Rex had disappeared months earlier. The spring thaw had dramatically changed the landscape, revealing features that had been hidden under snow during the winter. There, Tom pointed down at a small clearing near a frozen stream. See that dark spot moving around? Jake pressed his face to the window and felt his breath catch in his throat. Far below, a dog was moving back and forth across the clearing in what appeared to be a deliberate pattern. Even from this altitude, Jake could see the distinctive markings that identified the animal as Rex. He's alive, Jake whispered, tears streaming down his face. Tom, can you land anywhere near there? Not a chance, Tom replied, studying the terrain below. But there's a clearing about 2 miles south where I can put down. You'll have to hike in from there. The landing was rough, with Tom skillfully navigating between boulders and fallen trees to bring the plane down safely. Jake grabbed his pack and immediately set off toward Rex's location, his GPS unit guiding him through the wilderness. The 2-mile hike felt like the longest journey of Jake's life. His mind raced with questions. How had Rex survived all these months? How had he gotten out of the collapsed cave? What had he been doing all this time? As Jake crested a small ridge, he finally saw his dog clearly for the first time in 4 months. Rex was thinner than before, his coat matted and dirty, but he was very much alive and alert. The dog was positioned near what appeared to be a small mound of rocks and debris, and he was clearly guarding something. Rex, Jake called out, his voice echoing across the clearing. The dog's head snapped up immediately, his ears perking forward. For a moment, Rex seemed to study the approaching figure, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. Then recognition dawned, and the dog began barking excitedly, his tail wagging furiously. Jake ran across the clearing and dropped to his knees as Rex bounded toward him. The reunion was emotional and overwhelming, with Rex jumping up to lick Jake's face, while Jake wrapped his arms around his long-lost companion. I knew you were alive, boy, Jake sobbed, burying his face in Rex's fur. I never stopped looking for you. After several minutes of joyful reunion, Jake began to examine Rex more carefully. The dog was definitely thinner and showed signs of having lived rough for months, but he appeared to be in remarkably good health. His coat was thick and full, suggesting he had been finding adequate food, and his eyes were bright and alert. What have you been up to out here, boy? Jake asked, looking around the clearing. Rex immediately began barking and ran back toward the mound he had been guarding. As Jake followed, he realized that what he had initially taken for a random pile of rocks was actually a carefully constructed shelter. Rex had somehow managed to build a windbreak using stones, fallen branches, and what appeared to be pieces of metal and wood that looked familiar. Jake's breath caught as he recognized some of the materials. They were pieces of the structure he had seen embedded in the ice wall of the cave, the old wooden beams and metal fixtures that had looked like remnants of a mining operation. How did you get these out of the cave? Jake wondered aloud, examining the materials more closely. Rex barked and began pawing at a section of the shelter. Jake carefully moved some of the rocks and debris, revealing a small opening that led into what appeared to be a natural burrow or den. As his eyes adjusted to the darkness inside, Jake could make out more artifacts, pieces of equipment, personal items, and what looked like documents wrapped in some kind of waterproof material. "What is all this stuff?" Jake muttered, carefully extracting some of the items. Among the artifacts was a leather journal, its pages yellowed with age, but still readable thanks to the protective wrapping. Jake opened it carefully and began reading the first entry, dated March 15th, 1952. "Day 1 of the expedition. We have established base camp at coordinates." Jake read aloud, his voice trailing off as he realized what he was looking at. This wasn't just random debris from an old mining operation. These were the remains of a scientific expedition that had disappeared in the Alaska wilderness nearly 60 years ago. And somehow, Rex had not only discovered their final resting place, but had been protecting their legacy for months. As Jake continued to examine the artifacts, Rex sat patiently beside him, occasionally nudging items with his nose as if to direct Jake's attention to particularly important pieces. It was clear that the dog had been systematically recovering and protecting these historical treasures, driven by an instinct that Jake was only beginning to understand. The discovery would prove to be one of the most significant archaeological finds in Alaska's history, but for Jake, the real treasure was having his faithful companion back safe and sound. The artifacts that Rex had been protecting turned out to be the remains of the lost Mackenzie Arctic expedition of 1952, a scientific mission that had vanished without a trace during one of the worst storms in Alaska's recorded history. Dr. James Mackenzie and his team of 6 researchers had been studying climate patterns and geological formations when they disappeared, becoming one of Alaska's most enduring mysteries. Jake contacted the University of Alaska and the Alaska Historical Society, who immediately dispatched teams of archaeologists and historians to examine Rex's discovery. The site became a carefully controlled excavation, with Rex serving as an unofficial guide, leading researchers to additional caches of artifacts he had discovered and protected throughout the long winter months. "It's remarkable," said Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, the lead archaeologist on the project. "Your dog has not only preserved these materials from the elements, but has actually organized them in a way that suggests he understood their importance. We've never seen anything like it." The journal entries revealed the expedition's final days in heartbreaking detail. Dr. Mackenzie's team had taken shelter in the same cave system where Rex had been trapped, but a massive avalanche had sealed them inside. They had survived for several weeks, documenting their situation and their scientific findings until the end. Rex's behavior during the excavation was extraordinary. He seemed to understand that the artifacts were important and needed protection. When researchers worked at the site, Rex would patrol the perimeter, keeping watch for any threats. When they left for the day, he would carefully cover the exposed artifacts with branches and stones, protecting them from weather and scavengers. "He's been doing this for months," Jake explained to a reporter from the Anchorage Daily News who had come to cover the story. Rex somehow understood that these things were important and needed to be preserved. He's been their guardian all this time. The story of Rex's discovery captured international attention. News crews from major networks traveled to Alaska to document the remarkable tale of the rescue dog who had become an archaeological guardian. Rex, with his dignified bearing and obvious intelligence, became an instant celebrity, though he seemed more interested in his work than in the attention. Dr. Sarah Chen, whose rescue had indirectly led to this discovery, worked closely with the research team to document the expedition's scientific findings. The 1952 team had been remarkably advanced in their research methods, and their climate data provided valuable insights into long-term weather patterns in the region. "In a way, Rex completed their mission," Dr. Chen observed. "They wanted their research to contribute to our understanding of this environment, and by protecting their work, Rex made sure their sacrifice wasn't in vain." As autumn approached, the excavation was completed, and the artifacts were carefully transported to the University of Alaska for preservation and study. The Mackenzie expedition materials would become the centerpiece of a new exhibit on Arctic exploration, with Rex's story prominently featured. Jake and Rex returned to their search and rescue duties, but their relationship had deepened through their shared ordeal. Rex seemed more attuned to Jake's emotions and more protective of their team members. The months of independence had made him more confident and resourceful, qualities that served him well in their rescue work. The cave system where everything had begun was eventually reopened and thoroughly explored. Researchers found evidence of how Rex had escaped through a series of natural passages that had been revealed when the original collapse had shifted the ice formations. His survival had been a combination of intelligence, determination, and remarkable luck. Rex didn't just survive out there, Jake reflected during a quiet moment at the rescue headquarters. He found a purpose. He became the guardian of something important, something that needed protection. In a way, he was still doing rescue work, just on a much longer timeline. The bond between Jake and Rex had always been strong, but their experience had transformed it into something deeper. They had both learned that sometimes the most important rescues aren't the ones that happen in a matter of hours, but the ones that take months or even years to complete. Rex continued to serve with the Alaska Search and Rescue Team for several more years, participating in dozens of successful missions and saving many lives. He became something of a legend in the rescue community, known not just for his skills, but for his remarkable story of survival and dedication. The Mackenzie expedition artifacts provided valuable insights into Alaska's climate history and contributed to ongoing research into Arctic environmental changes. The expedition members were finally given proper recognition for their contributions to science, and their families found closure after nearly 60 years of uncertainty. Rex's story became a symbol of loyalty, determination, and the unexpected ways that heroes can emerge from tragedy. His months in the wilderness, protecting the legacy of explorers who had died decades before he was born, demonstrated that heroism comes in many forms and that sometimes the most important work happens when no one is watching. Years later, when Rex finally retired from active duty, a statue was erected at the University of Alaska in honor of both the Mackenzie expedition and the remarkable dog who had preserved their legacy. The inscription read, "In memory of the Mackenzie Arctic expedition of 1952, and in honor of Rex, faithful guardian of their final testament." Jake would often visit the statue with Rex, reflecting on their extraordinary journey together. The old dog would sit quietly beside the monument, his eyes alert and dignified, as if he understood the significance of what he had accomplished during those long months in the Alaska wilderness. Their story became a testament to the unbreakable bond between humans and their canine companions, and to the remarkable things that can happen when courage, loyalty, and determination converge in the face of impossible odds. If you enjoyed this incredible true story of loyalty and discovery in the Alaskan wilderness, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more amazing tales of survival and heroism. Hit the notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads, and let us know in the comments what you thought about Rex's remarkable journey. Until next time, keep exploring the extraordinary stories that remind us of the incredible bonds between humans and animals. See you in the next video.